how does a modern, educated nation just fall apart and descend into barbarism? It's one of history's most terrifying questions, and one we really need to understand. Today, we're going to break down the rise of Nazism not as some inevitable event, but as a perfect storm. A whole series of devastating crises that paved the way for one of the world's most destructive ideologies to grab power. Okay, let's get into it. We're actually going to start near the end. It's the spring of 1945. Germany is in ruins, and a prominent Nazi doctor says these chilling words to his wife. This wasn't just a fear of losing a war, it was a deep, terrifying fear of revenge. It was a shocking admission of the horrors his own side had unleashed on the world. You see, that doctor was the father of an 11-year-old boy named Helmuth, and this little boy overheard his parents having this absolutely terrifying conversation. Should they kill the entire family, or should the father just commit suicide alone? The very next day, after one last trip outside, Helmut's father shot himself in his office. The trauma was so deep that for 9 years, Helmut refused to eat at home because he was afraid his own mother might poison him. Helmut's story really forces us to ask two huge questions. First, what exactly had his father and millions of other seemingly ordinary people actually done? And maybe more importantly for us, what kind of world was this? What historical forces created a situation where these actions and these fears were even possible? To answer that, we gotta go back to the beginning. So here's our game plan for understanding this total collapse. We're gonna start with the fragile republic that was born from World War I. Then we'll trace how it fell apart through crisis after crisis. We'll see how Hitler stepped in with a dark promise of salvation. Look at the methods he used to build a mass movement. And finally, we'll talk about why this history is so critical for understanding our world today. To really get why Hitler rose to power, you first have to understand the failure of what came before him, the Weimar Republic. This was Germany's first real shot at democracy, set up in 1919, right from the ashes of Imperial Germany after its shocking defeat in World War I. But here's the thing, it was a republic born with a fatal weakness. And that weakness was the Treaty of Versailles. The terms were just absolutely crushing. Germany lost huge, resource-rich lands, got stripped of its colonies, and, this was the most humiliating part, was forced to take all the blame for the war. The financial hit of £6 billion in reparations was crippling. For a lot of Germans, the politicians who signed this treaty weren't leaders. They were the November criminals, who had, in their eyes, stabbed the nation in the back. So the Republic was seen as illegitimate from day one. And this map, wow, it just brilliantly shows you the scale of that loss. This wasn't just numbers on a piece of paper. Look at it. Huge chunks of territory, industrial centers, millions of people, just carved away. This visual, this picture of defeat, was a constant burning source of national humiliation that just poisoned the political air for years and years. So that national shame was the foundation, but what came next was like a relentless series of earthquakes that just shattered the state. This fragile republic was battered by one crisis after another, creating this atmosphere of total chaos and desperation where, extreme solutions started to sound, well, plausible. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's a textbook case of a state just falling apart. There's almost no period of real stability. It kicks off with violent political uprisings from the far left and the far right. Then comes the total economic meltdown of hyperinflation. You get a brief, shaky recovery built on borrowed money, but that lifeline gets cut by the Wall Street crash of 1929, which throws Germany into the Great Depression. It was just one disaster after another. If you want to grasp the sheer chaos, you just need to look at this number. By December of 1923, one single US dollar was worth nearly 99 trillion German marks. This is hyperinflation. It's when money basically becomes meaningless. Your life savings, your pension, the entire economic foundation of the middle class was just wiped out, turned into worthless paper overnight. And what's so wild about this slide is it shows you the absurdity of everyday life. This isn't a bank heist. This was probably just a trip to the store to buy a loaf of bread. People were literally carrying their money around in carts and wheelbarrows. It got so ridiculous that stacks of money were cheaper to burn for heat than firewood, or cheaper to use as wallpaper than actual wallpaper. And just when Germany was sort of getting back on its feet, the Great Depression hit, and it hit Germany harder than almost any other country. By 1932, unemployment just exploded to an unbelievable 6 million people. This image, it really captures that deep despair. Men just queuing for a job, any job. Their dignity and their futures just vanishing in front of them. Widespread despair was the new normal. So, on top of all the economic chaos, the political system itself was broken. The Weimar Constitution had this fatal flaw, Article 48. This thing basically gave the president the power to suspend civil rights and rule by himself in an emergency. Well, as the crises piled up, this emergency power was used all the time, completely eroding public faith in democracy and making the idea of one strong leader taking charge seem pretty normal. This total failure created the perfect vacuum. And into this void of economic despair and political paralysis stepped Adolf Hitler. For years, he and his Nazi party were just a fringe group. But in the chaos of the Depression, their radical message started to find an audience, a desperate one. They didn't cause Germany's problems, but they offered a simple, powerful, and ultimately terrifying solution. The Nazi promise was basically tailor-made to prey on every single fear and grievance we've just talked about. He promised to tear up the hated Versailles Treaty and bring back national pride. He promised jobs and food for the unemployed. He promised to build a strong, unified nation, free from all the messy fighting of democracy. And most chillingly, he promised to purge Germany of so-called foreign influences and internal enemies, creating simple scapegoats for the nation's really complex problem. And the crucial point is right here on this chart. The cause and effect is just undeniable. In 1928, before the Great Depression really hit, the Nazis were politically irrelevant with just 2.6% of the vote. 4 years later, in the absolute depths of the crisis, they were the largest party in Germany with 37%. This incredible leap shows you exactly how their message of hope and hatred connected with a population that felt like it had lost everything. But Hitler's success wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. The Nazis really pioneered a whole new style of politics that was about more than just policy. They understood the power of propaganda, of ritual, of mass spectacle, to create this powerful emotional bond with millions of people, building an alternate reality where Germany was strong, unified, and destined for greatness. I mean, just look at the sheer scale of this Nuremberg rally. These events were like carefully choreographed political theater. The sea of banners, the rhythmic chanting, the torchlight parades, it was all designed to overwhelm you, to dissolve your personal worries into the feeling of belonging to something massive, powerful, and unstoppable. For people who felt broken and alone, that feeling was intoxicating. And this was all driven by a really sophisticated propaganda machine, using every modern tool they had, posters, films, radio, and his own epic speeches. Joseph Goebbels and his ministry didn't just spread lies. They created a simple mythic story. Hitler wasn't just a politician. He was a savior sent to deliver Germany from its suffering. And the nation's problems were all caused by internal enemies who had to be eliminated. So let's bring this all together. The fall of the Weimar Republic and the rise of Nazism was not an accident of history. It was the result of a specific and deadly combination of factors, a historical perfect storm. And the lessons from it are absolutely essential for understanding just how fragile any democracy can be. Here's the crucial takeaway, a really clear framework for this. 4 key ingredients created this catastrophe. First, deep national humiliation. Second, extreme economic despair that basically destroyed the middle class. Third, a fragile political system that people lost all faith in. And fourth, the arrival of a charismatic leader offering simple answers and convenient scapegoats. It was this toxic mix that could take an educated man, a doctor and father like Helmuth, and turn him into a willing part of a murderous regime. And that brings us to our final vital question. Understanding the story of Helmut's father and the collapse of his world isn't just about studying the past. It's about learning to recognize the warning signs. This historical sequence gives us a framework for analyzing political stability today. It forces us to ask, what are the symptoms of a democracy in crisis? And what is our responsibility when we start to see them emerge?